Thank you, Senator, for the question. We are focused broadly on addressing
questions prior to the election, and if Facebook has not, will Facebook focus on producing those ads?
Yes, Senator, we have identified everything. We've produced everything that we've identified that is the product of what we call coordinated inauthentic activity from Facebook, and we are continuing to investigate, and we commit to keep the committee up to date on any further progress in our investigation.
And so that would include all ads placed from Russian sources? All ads
from Russian sources that,
as well as others,
that are inauthentic and directed at these political issues. There are, of course, many advertisements cross-border for legitimate purposes that we have not produced.
Overall, Facebook identified more than 3,000 ad purchases worth $100,000 during the 2016 election that had links to Russia. Russian agents posted messages that reached 126 million users. The ads, accounts, and posts that Facebook found attempted to amplify divisive political issues across the political spectrum. Twitter identified around 200 accounts linked to Russian groups identified by Facebook. Russia Today, or RT, as it's sometimes called, spent approximately $274,000 targeting U.S. markets. 2016, Russian agents published more than 131,000 messages on Twitter. Google found tens of thousands of ads buys by Russian accounts that use YouTube or Google. Russian agents uploaded about 1,000 videos on YouTube. So questions to each of you, and a short answer on these two questions I'm going to put together. To each company, starting with Mr. Stretch, have you completed internal investigations to identify all accounts, advertisements, and posts with connections to Russia that purchase ads in the lead up to the 26th election? And if not, what is the timeline for completion?
Senator, as I stated in my testimony, the investigation continues, and we expect to keep the committee up to date on any further discoveries.
Okay.
The same goes for Twitter. We are continuing to work with your staff on both, our relevant period was September 1st and November 15th. We're working with your staff on other investigations you'd like to see.
And for Google, the answer is similar. As our investigation continues, we'll keep the committee up to date.
Okay. And then one that I would like to have you write and give me answers in writing. Could you provide an update on what your internal investigations have found? Please be specific in regard to the number of accounts and total value of the advertisements. My time's up, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stretch, we know that Russian operatives built misleading pages like Black Matters US and United Muslims of America to attract Facebook users. They then exploited a powerful Facebook tool called custom audiences to track down those users and send them targeted messages. Can you explain who was targeted using Facebook's custom audiences tool?
Thank you for the question, Senator. As a threshold matter, you're correct that much of the content we've seen is essentially imitative of social causes, very meaningful ones to many members of the community and the Facebook community, and it's what makes, I think, this content so vile, so upsetting, so cynical. Its attempt to exploit divisions in our society. In terms of the advertising tools that were used to promote these pages that were masquerading, essentially, the advertising targeting that was used in the main was a combination of very broad geographic targeting. Most of the ads, about 75% of the corpus we've given you, was targeted to the United States as a whole. And about a quarter of the ads were targeted at a more granular level to states. And they were targeted to interest groups. So we have various what we call like-based or interest-based targeting that was apparently intended to attract people who were following the causes you've identified to subscribe to those pages.
Thank you. And what have you done with the tools since?
Thank you for the question. It's an important one for us because we do believe these tools are powerful, and yet we have a responsibility to make sure they're not used to inflame division. So what we're doing is making a number of changes to our ad targeting policies. We're tightening the restrictions on hate speech and ads generally. We're adding additional layers of review where people use potentially sensitive categories for targeting. And we're also limiting the ad content permissions so that where ads are directed at potentially divisive issues, we're trying to tighten our standards to make sure that they're not targeting individuals or communities.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Salgado, why did Google give preferred status to Russia Today, a Russian propaganda arm on YouTube?
There was a period of time where Russia Today qualified, really because of algorithms, to participate in an advertising program that opened up some inventory for them. It's objective standards around popularity and some other criteria to be able to participate in that program. Platforms or publishers like RT drop in and out of the program as things change, and that is the case with RT. They dropped out of the program.
Well, why didn't you revoke RT's preferred status after the ICA came out in January 2017? It took you to September of 2017 to do it.
The removal of RT from the program was actually a result of, as I understand it, is a result of some of the drop in viewership, not as a result of any action otherwise. So there was nothing about RT or its content that meant that it stayed in or stayed out.
Okay, a quick one for Twitter. Twitter produced images from tweets that contained false voting information. Example, telling voters they could vote by sending a text message, all targeting likely Clinton voters just before the election. Twitter initially responded to complaints, saying Twitter had, quote, determined that it was not in violation of our rules. Twitter has said there was no obvious Russian origin. The posts were removed only after Twitter's CEO was directly notified by a Twitter user. That's the facts as I understand them. Why was this false content allowed to remain in place?
My understanding is once we had user reports of the content, we began to remove it as illegal voter suppression. And the interesting thing about the text-to-vote tweets that we shared with your staff was there was a small amount of tweets relative to the size of the platform, but impressions of tweets calling out those things as fake were 8 times as large. We had 10 times the amount of retweets calling those things out as fake.
Could you say that again? Impressions? I don't quite understand.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Great question. Okay. And so we're all on the same page. Impressions is a metric we use to determine whether or not a tweet has been in view on our product, so potentially seen by a user. But the interesting thing about the text-to-vote tweets were that we saw a complete counter-narrative around them, the Twitter community coming together.
Can we start with you, Mr. Edgett? For Twitter, can you walk us through how many accounts there are, how many users there are, how many are anonymous, how many are fake as a subset of both anonymous and purportedly real?
So we have 330 million monthly active users. That we just reported a couple of weeks ago. We track things internally like
say 330 million.
Daily active users, also look at things like impressions. We estimate that less than 5% of Twitter users are potentially false accounts or spam or automated.
So less than 5%?
Less than 5% overall. And
can you distinguish between fake and automated? Because wouldn't there be accounts that real people would run, but for, you can imagine, business cycle purposes, where you'd have accounts that are automated but aren't fake.
Right. So yeah, great. Thank you for letting me distinguish that. We look at whether or not an account is spam or automated based on whether it looks like there's a human behind it or not. We can't calculate in some instances whether someone is pretending to be someone that they're not. We have a pseudonymous policy that allows you to come on and create your own name. It doesn't have to be the one that you have. So in that instances, we can't track those metrics.
And if you break down, though, in political Twitter, it sure looks like there are a whole bunch of people that have 5,000-ish users. They're following 5,000, and they've got 5,000. They're following 5,000, they have 5,000 followers, and it looks like many of these accounts that are the sort of most laughably fake are self-referential, that they're retweeting back and forth at each other. When you evaluate impressions numbers, do you have some way of quantifying which impressions are likely inside the universe of the 95% that you think are real users? And is that how you prioritize trying to figure out where the big problems are?
We obviously prioritize automated activity. You saw that in the written testimony. It's a way for malicious actors to sort of get their voice out. So the instance that you discussed where it looks like there's just a lot of retweeting among a circle of followers. Some of that can be positive and natural if you have a number of friends that you're following and you're all interested in the same thing. Some of it can be malicious and automated. Our tools are getting better each day to determine what is malicious, what is automated, what's not actually real. We're able to see the distinction between how a real human tweets versus how a robot tweets. So we're working on redoubling our efforts on that regard.
And I want to go to Facebook quickly too, but it would seem to me that there's a pretty big distinction between objectively verifiable fake things, the text to vote, right, or fake voter information or voter location or voter hours, and things that are narrative based, where people have competing worldviews and differing interpretations of how facts fit in some overarching narrative of, actual good versus evil, and then merely political versions that are the subset of those debates. How do you rank order what you should focus on, and what's the human capital that you have doing this? So Russia and China and potentially North Korea, Iranian examples are sort of straightforward in the context of the way we've been debating it in the U.S. election. But in the context of potentially jihadi accounts, there's a whole range of theological interpretation about people who don't quite believe in violence in the name of religion and people who think that's a threshold that a certain theology requires of them. Who are your people who do this work?
So we prioritize safety and abuse. It's the #1 priority of the company. And earlier this year, we actually repivoted all of our engineering, product, and design teams to solve this problem set. So that's our #1 priority. As a subset of that are things like automated accounts being used by malicious actors to sort of amplify their voice. We have hundreds, and in terms of our entire engineering organization, sometimes thousands. We're a company of about 3,800 employees. So over like half of them are focused on this problem at certain times throughout our life cycle.
But sort of understanding the intricacies of jihadi theology is not something that an engineer is exactly trained to do. So
No.
who are your content experts by domain? How do you hire for that?
We have a very respected trust and safety team who has to research these issues around the world. We're a global platform being used everywhere except for a few places. So we have teams that are researching these issues and trying to just distinguish what you're talking about between violent groups and groups that may have some connection to them but are more political arms. We've seen many instances of that. So there are teams who have to sort of tease out the nuances and understand how these groups are acting and how they're coordinating at times. But there are teams that research and study these issues and also help us refine and implement new policies around them.
Thank you. Mr. Stretch, I'll save some metrics questions for you after the hearing or a subsequent round, but can you tell us just a little bit about Facebook's human capital solution to the same problem?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for the question. So today, across our safety, security, and product and community operations teams, we have about 10,000 people who are working on safety and security generally, and we're committing to investing more and doubling that number by the end of 2018. On the question of extremist content generally, I think you raise a really important point, which is that we need to understand the behavior, and we need to have the capacity both as a company and as an industry to be able to track it and eradicate it. So we have thousands of people who as part of their job on a regular basis are attempting to keep terrorism off of Facebook. We have 150 people who do nothing else. That's their job. And across that 150 people, they have, as Mr. Edgett suggested, in our case as well, significant expertise in understanding jihadi threats. They cover about 30 separate languages. One of the things that each of us has done as a company has worked together to make sure that the industry is sharing threat information and sharing expertise, and also providing that information to other smaller companies that may not have the same level of resources. We all agree, not just that terrorism doesn't have a place on Facebook, terrorism has no place on the internet. And we're trying to lead the industry to make sure that we're all doing our part to address that threat. And the last point I'll make is that it also requires an ongoing dialogue with law enforcement, with the government, because there's a great wealth of information in the government as it tracks these issues that they can share with us. And that in turn gives me some optimism as we address the question of foreign interference in the election. We know how to work together to address a threat on the internet, both as an industry and working with government. And I think if we bring that same concerted behavior to bear looking at this threat of foreign interference in the election, I think we'll make some progress.
Thanks. I ran past my time, but I'll follow up with you more as well on your team. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you on the panel. Mr. Stretch, last night, 19 major civil rights organizations sent a letter to Facebook which explained their, quote, deep concern regarding ads, pages, and hateful content on your platform used to divide our country, and in particular to promote anti-Muslim, anti-black, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ animus. The organizations referenced a number of examples that had previously been reported by the media, including a Russian Facebook account that, quote, not only promoted anti-immigrant messaging online, but also managed to organize an in-person anti-refugee rally in Twin Falls, Idaho in August of 2016. The letter also detailed a reported situation in which, quote, Facebook offered its expertise to a bigoted advocacy group by creating a case study testing different video formats and advising on how to enhance the reach of the group's anti-refugee campaign in swing states during the final weeks of the 2016 election. What is your response to this letter? Is it true that Facebook assisted in an anti-Muslim effort?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So let me start by saying that the content that we've produced to this committee and that was run by these fake accounts masquerading as real, authentic identities is vile. And it's vile for precisely the reason you say. It's particularly exploitative insofar as it was directed at groups that have every reason to expect us to protect the authenticity of debate on Facebook. In terms of what we're doing in response, we are reviewing and tightening our ad policies, and there's two particular changes that we're making. One is we are tightening our content guidelines as they apply to ads with respect to violence. So much of the content that is so disturbing involves threats of violence towards communities, and that has no place on Facebook, and it certainly has no place.
Regardless of source?
Yes, regardless of source. Regardless of source, exactly. We want our ad tools to be used for political discourse, certainly, but we do not want our ad tools to be used to inflame and divide.
Well, that's the point I'm trying to get to. As I read that set of facts to you, the trigger word was a Russian Facebook account, at which point most of us would say, hold the phone. What is Russia doing promoting anti-immigrant, anti-refugee sentiment in the United States? Now take the word Russian out of it. A Facebook account that promotes anti-immigrant, anti-refugee sentiment in the United States. I don't know if you would characterize that as vile. I sure would. These groups would. What I'm trying to get to is this. I think we can all, when we start with the word Russian, fake, trolls, bots, so forth, we know the starting point is a trigger. Something needs to be done. The second thing we know is if it includes a reference to a political candidate or a party, then it's in a category 2 of electioneering. I'll let Senator Klobuchar address that issue. I'm sure she will in a moment or two. And then the third question gets into what you characterize in this case as vile content. How are you going to sort this out consistent with the basic values of this country when it comes to freedom of expression?
It's a great question. I don't suggest it's easy. We do value personal expression, and when that is the purpose of your service, there is going to be content that is objectionable, even beyond objectionable. Where we're really trying to draw the line is with respect to advertising content and using our tools to promote messages
I'm going to
and promote
stipulate
pages.
these are all ads. I'm going to stipulate that at the beginning. They're
Yes.
all ads.
Yes.
They are being purchased to affect an outcome of an election or a voter's sentiment or to mislead voters. I'd like to ask your colleagues to address this as well. Mr. Edgett, what would Twitter say to that question?
Those ads have no place on Twitter, and our ads policies actually address those things. So if there's inflammatory content that some even would find to be upsetting, that's not the type of ad we want running on Twitter. We distinguish between organic tweets, which are those that you or I or anyone here today can tweet from their phone or computer, from advertising. Advertising are tweets that are serving to someone who hasn't asked to follow the content, hasn't asked to be a part of that conversation. So we draw a very hard line on making sure advertisements are not inflammatory.
I certainly commend you and endorse that, but agree with Senator Sass that when it comes to drawing those lines, it's a challenge for us, and we do it for a living. And I think it'll be a challenge for you as well. Mr. Salgado, would you like to comment on that?
I agree that it's a real challenge. We have policies to keep our ads and the high quality, and the proposals we've made and that we'll be implementing around election ad transparency, I think, reflect that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen, I'm very proud that the three companies you're representing here today are American companies. And I think you do enormous good. But your power sometimes scares me. Mr. Stretch, how many advertisers does Facebook have?
We have approximately 5 million advertisers on a monthly basis, Senator.
Did China run ads in the last election cycle that tried to impact our election?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Not that you're aware of. Did Turkmenistan?
No, Senator, not that I'm aware of. We have.
How about North Korea? Turn that off.
I'm not aware of other foreign actors running the same sort of campaign.
How can you be aware? I mean, this is what I mean. You've got 5 million advertisers, and you're going to tell me that you're able to trace the origin of all of those advertisements? If I want to hire a lawyer, if I wanted to hire you when you were in private practice, you have an incredible resume, and say, let's go through about 4 shell corporations. I want to run some ads, and let's go through 4 or 5 shell corporations because I want to hide my identity. You're telling me you have the ability to trace through all of these corporations and find the true identity of every one of your advertisers. You're not telling me that, are you?
Senator, the commitment we are making
No,
is.
sir, I'm just asking about your ability, not commitment. Can you do it today?
We're not able to see beyond the activity we see on the platform, the technical signals that we get from an account. Now, we do think that the technical signals we see can be used to help us identify inauthentic behavior.
The truth
but
of
in
the
terms of what's
matter is,
behind,
I'm trying to get us down from la-la land here. The truth of the matter is you have 5 million advertisers that change every month, every minute, probably every second. You don't have the ability to know who every one of those advertisers is, do you? Today, right now. Not your commitment. I'm asking about your ability.
To your question about seeing essentially behind the platform to understand if there are shell corporations, of course the answer is no. We cannot see behind the activity.
Let me ask you something else. If I came to you, I don't mean just to pick on you, but I don't have enough time to do all three of you, so you two gentlemen get to skate. If I came to you and said, look, I want to buy an ad that everybody sees on Facebook, that's going to be cost prohibitive. Can we agree on that?
That's likely the case, Senator, yes.
So I've got to narrow it down. And you can help me narrow it down because that's your business model. You collect data and lease it out to companies who use that data to sell people products, services, and candidates. Isn't that basically your business model?
Senator, we do provide targeted advertising. We don't actually share the data of individuals with advertisers.
Do you have a profile on me?
Senator, if you're a Facebook user, we would permit you to be targeted with an advertisement based on your characteristics and your likes, along with other people who share similar characteristics.
Well, let me put it another way. Let's suppose your CEO came to you, not you, but somebody who could do it in your company, maybe you could, and said, I want to know everything we can find out about Senator Graham. I want to know the movies he likes. I want to know the bars he goes to. I want to know who his friends are. I want to know what schools he went to. You could do that, couldn't you?
So, and I want to be, it is a very good question.
You can do that, though, can't you?
The answer is absolutely not. We have limitations in place on our ability to review the personal
I'm not asking about your rules. I'm saying you have the ability to do that, don't you?
Again, Senator, the answer is no. We're not
You can't put a name to a face to a piece of data? You're telling me that?
So we have designed our systems to prevent exactly that, to protect the privacy of our users.
I understand,
Senator,
but you can get around that to find that identity, can't you?
No, Senator, I cannot.
That's your testimony under oath.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I'm about out of time. I'm going to take one more minute, or one more 30 seconds. Are you a media, let me ask Google this to be fair. Are you a media company or a neutral technology platform?
We're a technology platform primarily.
That's what I thought you'd say. Yeah. You don't think you're one of the largest largest newspaper in 92 countries?
We're not a newspaper. We're a platform for sharing of information that can include news from sources such as newspapers.
Isn't that what newspapers do?
This is a platform from which news can be read from news sources.
I'm way over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to ask what bar you go to. Don't be concerned. Thank you to both of you for this important hearing. So I come at this just with this simple idea that our democracy was formed to be self-governing, and that means we don't want foreign entities influencing decisions that our citizens make, and they have a right of freedom to make their own decisions, and I think that was interfered with by influence by Russians and also by others when there's no rules in place to tell us where these ads, paid ads, are coming from. And so I do appreciate the efforts from these companies, but I don't think it's enough. We're going to have a patchwork of ads from different companies. Some won't be doing any, some will be doing one thing, another will be doing another. And we wouldn't have actual enforcement, and management can change, and decisions changes. And so that's why I think it's very important that we have the same rules of the road for these issue ads as well as candidate ads that we have for TV, radio, and print. It's that simple. And that is the bill that Senator Warner and I have, and that Senator McCain is our co-sponsor, and we're very pleased with that. And he looks at this as a national security issue. So my first question is simply, will you support our bill? Mr. Stretch.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So first, we're not waiting for legislation, as I explained earlier.
Just if you could just answer that, if you will support our bill, and if not, why not?
Well, we've drawn on much of what's in the bill that to inform our announcement on Friday related to ads transparency and disclosure obligations, and we stand ready to work with you and your co-sponsors on that legislation going forward.
Mr. Edgett from Twitter.
The same goes for Twitter.
Yeah, we certainly support the goals of the legislation and would like to work through the nuances to make it work for all of us.
Okay, because just to clarify, while you are taking responsibility for a lot of what's happened here and trying to make some changes, there wouldn't be an outside enforcer of any of your policies, right? It'll just be you. Is that true? Is that? Not you personally, but your companies. Okay. Can someone answer? Sorry.
That's correct.
Okay. And also, no one has said yet that they will include issue ads, right? And that is what we've just heard from Mr. Stretch. 90% of the Russian paid political ads were issue ads. And as you know, somehow the radio station in Thief River Falls, Minnesota, is able to figure out what an issue ad is under the federal guidelines. And I would just hope that your companies could do that, because the way our election system works is that campaigns are able to see each other's ads, and also the journalists and the public are able to see the ads. So that has been a stumbling block so far. And so is this a problem that you're not going to be able to figure out those rules like TV, broadcast, and radio? And I'm just trying to understand that.
So as we announced last week, issue ads are sort of a 2.0 or next version for us, and something that we're thinking hard about how to operationalize and what rules to put around it, and to determine what is an issue ad on a platform